The sun dipped low over Riverside, California, casting long golden shadows across the quiet suburban streets. Wind rustled through the oak trees lining the sidewalks, and the distant sound of kids laughing echoed from a nearby playground. It was the kind of peaceful evening that 72-year-old Raymond Gunny Lewis lived for. Every Tuesday for the last 5 years, he'd taken this very same route with his 8-year-old granddaughter Lily hand in hand, their ritual walk for ice cream, and stories about heroes both real and imagined. Gunny, his nickname since Vietnam, still walked like he was on parade. His back straight, chin up. Even in retirement, the discipline hadn't left him. The Marine Corps emblem on his forearm had faded with time, but its meaning had not. He had spent 24 years in uniform, 3 tours in Vietnam, and another 2 decades mentoring youth as an ROTC instructor. But nothing in all his years had prepared him for what was about to happen. As they turned the corner, near Riverside Elementary, a police cruiser idled at the curb, lights flashing. Officer Aaron Briggs stood outside the vehicle, one hand resting on his duty belt, eyes locked on Raymond, as if sizing up a threat. Gunny slowed his pace instinctively, protective instinct rising. Grandpa Lily whispered, her small fingers tightening around his. "Why is that police car there?" "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Gunny replied calmly. "But let's see if we can help." That's what he'd always taught: if something looks wrong, step up. Don't walk away. So he did exactly what he'd taught hundreds of young Marines: approach with respect, hands visible, voice steady. Evening, Officer Raymond said with a gentle nod, "I'm Raymond Lewis. My granddaughter and I walk this street every Tuesday. Is something going on we should be aware of?" But Officer Briggs didn't nod. He didn't smile. He stepped forward, rigid and tense, eyes narrowing as if Raymond had just confessed to a crime. "Sir, I need you to step back," Briggs snapped. "We're responding to a report of a suspicious person in the area." Gunny raised an eyebrow. "A suspicious person? Officer, I've lived on this block for 20 years. Maybe I can help identify—" "I said step back," Briggs barked, this time with more edge. Lily flinched. Gunny felt her grip tighten. Something in the officer's posture and his tone, it wasn't right. Not just alert, aggressive, defensive, threatened by nothing more than an elderly man and his granddaughter on a routine evening walk. In that moment, Raymond Lewis wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't a veteran. He wasn't even a grandfather. He was a suspicious person. And that label, based on nothing more than a vague call and a nervous cop, was about to ignite a firestorm that would ripple across the nation. Raymond Gunny Lewis kept his body calm and posture relaxed, doing everything he'd ever taught his recruits about how to defuse a tense encounter. His open palms were visible, his tone steady, but it didn't seem to matter. Officer Aaron Briggs, already on edge, paced forward, hand hovering near his holster. His eyes never left Raymond's. It wasn't just suspicion, it was something harsher. Mistrust, fear. Or maybe a misplaced sense of power fueled by uncertainty. Sir, Briggs barked, "You've been asked to step back." "I understand," Officer Raymond replied, keeping his voice level. "But I've lived here over 20 years. That's my granddaughter. She's scared. All I did was ask if there's anything I should be concerned about." "Step back." Lily clutched Raymond's hand, now trembling for the first time in decades, not from age but from restraint. Her wide eyes flicked from the officer to her grandfather, unsure which adult she could trust anymore. Her voice was no louder than a whisper. "Grandpa, I'm scared." Raymond leaned toward her and gently said, "It's okay, baby. Grandpa's here. We'll be home soon." But Briggs took the slight movement as defiance. "That's it. Hands where I can see them." Raymond instinctively lifted his hands higher. "Officer Briggs, I'm not resisting. I'm complying. Look, here's my ID." He reached into his back pocket, slowly, deliberately. Years of training had taught him how quickly things could go wrong when movements were misunderstood. He retrieved his wallet and held it open, displaying both his driver's license and his retired military identification. Briggs didn't even glance at the IDs. Instead, he stepped forward and grabbed Raymond's wrist with unnecessary force. "Hey, there's no need for that," Raymond said firmly, but without raising his voice. "I'm not a threat." The officer didn't respond. Lily began to cry, her tiny hands trying to pull her grandfather away. "Stop, you're hurting him," she sobbed. From across the street, neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by flashing lights and raised voices. One man shouted, "That's Ray Lewis. He's a Marine vet. He walks that little girl every week. Mrs. Avila, a nurse from 3 doors down, called out, "Officer, that's a mistake. He's a local hero." Briggs ignored them. His grip tightened. Raymond winced. "My granddaughter is crying." "Officer, you're terrifying her. Stop interfering." Briggs snapped. "I'm not interfering," Raymond replied. "I'm trying to de-escalate. There's a child here. Please, think about what you're doing." But Briggs was no longer listening. His pride had taken control. Raymond's calm presence, his refusal to cower, had become a threat in itself. He reached behind his belt, pulled the taser, and shouted, "Don't move!" Raymond didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake." And then came the words, "Taser, taser, taser." A high-pitched crack snapped through the air. The prong struck Raymond's chest, sending 50,000 volts through his body. His knees buckled instantly. Lily screamed as her grandfather collapsed, twitching uncontrollably on the concrete. His Marine posture, once proud and composed, was now a tangle of pain and shock on the pavement. No Lily screamed, running to his side. Grandpa Briggs stood over them, breathing hard, taser still in hand, stunned by his own actions but making no move to help. Gasps erupted from the growing crowd. A teenager holding a smartphone shouted, "I got that all on video. You tasered a senior citizen. What the hell is wrong with you?" Mrs. Avila pushed through the onlookers, kneeling beside Lily to shield her eyes. "Call 911, she shouted. "He's not moving." Raymond's body finally stopped convulsing, but he lay motionless, chest rising shallowly, his hands twitching involuntarily from the aftermath. His military ID still lay beside him on the sidewalk, proof of a life that had once been dedicated to service, now crumpled and ignored. A bystander crouched beside Briggs. "You just tased a decorated Marine in front of his granddaughter. You're finished." But Briggs didn't reply. His face had drained of color. For the first time, it seemed, he realized the gravity of what he'd done. From somewhere in the distance, the familiar whine of sirens pierced the quiet evening. But there was another sound too, murmurs spreading through the crowd. Cell phones were out. Videos were already being uploaded. Hashtags were already being formed. "Justice for Gunny," had Raymond Lewis. Briggs stepped back, saying nothing as others rushed forward. Lily refused to let go of her grandfather's arm, even as adults tried to gently move her aside. And in that moment, captured from multiple angles by multiple witnesses, the world watched as a man who had once defended his country was treated as a threat in his own neighborhood, for nothing more than being present, respected, and brave. As Raymond Lewis lay trembling on the pavement, his body convulsing from the surge of 50,000 volts, the scene spiraled into chaos. His granddaughter Lily sobbed uncontrollably, cradled by a neighbor, her small frame shaking from shock and fear. Gasps and shouts echoed from all directions. "He's a veteran. Call someone. This is abuse." The horror in the air was thick and suffocating. Officer Aaron Briggs stood over Raymond, still holding the taser in his shaking hand, his chest heaving, as if he were the one under attack. But it wasn't over. One of the bystanders, a teenage boy named Marcus who had once helped Raymond carry groceries, had recorded the entire event. Shaking with disbelief, Marcus sent the footage to his father as Sergeant Dean Bennett, an active-duty Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton nearly 50 miles away. Within minutes, the video had been forwarded, reposted, and shared through encrypted veteran communication networks. Men and women who had once served with Raymond, some still in uniform, others long retired, were now watching in stunned silence as their former gunnery sergeant was disrespected and assaulted on American soil in front of his own granddaughter. At Camp Pendleton, Master Sergeant Dean Bennett didn't hesitate. "Gunny Lewis, that's who they hit," he said, staring hard at the paused frame on the phone, Raymond's weathered face frozen mid-shock. "Mount up. We roll in 10. What followed was less like a response and more like a military operation. Within 40 minutes, 5 tactical vehicles and 20 Marines in dress uniforms were en route to Riverside, their convoy moving swiftly and purposefully through evening traffic. Word spread quickly, Raymond "Gunny" Lewis had been attacked. And the Corps was coming. Back in the neighborhood, the air had changed. Raymond, barely conscious, was being stabilized by paramedics who had arrived minutes earlier. The taser's damage had triggered an irregular heartbeat, and the medics worked frantically to prepare him for transport. Lily clung to his hand until the last moment, whispering, "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm here." The flashing lights of ambulances and squad cars painted the night in chaotic reds and blues. But then another set of headlights appeared, steady, coordinated, and unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. As the first Marine truck came into view, the crowd hushed. The vehicles parked in precision along the block, and the doors swung open simultaneously. Out stepped Marines in full uniform, their boots hitting the pavement with deliberate unity. At their head was Master Sergeant Bennett, broad-shouldered, eyes steely, his campaign ribbons gleaming faintly under the streetlights. He walked directly up to Sergeant Ramirez, Briggs' supervisor, who was now on scene and trying to restore order. Sergeant Bennett said, saluting with crisp formality, "I'm Master Sergeant Dean Bennett, United States Marine Corps. The man injured is Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Lewis, our mentor, our brother, and a decorated veteran of 3 tours. We're here to ensure his safety and collect statements from witnesses." Sergeant Ramirez blinked momentarily, taken aback by the presence of so many uniformed Marines. "This is still an active police scene," he began cautiously. With respect, Bennett interrupted, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "That scene ended the moment a decorated Marine was tasered without cause in front of a child. We're not here to interfere. We're here to document, protect, and make sure this never gets buried." The Marines fanned out, disciplined and calm. They formed a respectful perimeter around the paramedics and bystanders, offering water, taking down names, recording statements. Several neighbors voluntarily handed over phone footage. One elderly man handed over a USB drive with security camera footage from his porch. Meanwhile, 2 Marines stood beside Lily, who now sat wrapped in a blanket on a neighbor's porch. One of them, Corporal Nguyen, gently knelt to speak with her. "You're very brave, Lily," he said softly. "Your grandfather taught a lot of Marines how to be heroes. We're going to take care of him now, just like he took care of us." Lily nodded, her tear-streaked face slowly finding steadiness in the presence of those who clearly adored the man she called Grandpa. By the time Raymond was loaded into the ambulance, the Marines had already filed an initial incident report with video witness lists and timestamps. A young Marine captain stepped forward and handed a printed summary to Sergeant Ramirez. "We've documented everything. We'll be forwarding this to the Department of Defense, the VA Legal Division, and the Governor's Office. We're not just dealing with a community matter anymore. This is national." The weight of what had happened was finally setting in for Officer Briggs. Still standing in the shadows, taser in its holster, he watched as the men and women in uniform who had once saluted Raymond now turned their backs on him in disgust. But the impact wasn't confined to one block. By midnight, the hashtag Justice for Gunny was trending nationwide. Veterans groups, civil rights advocates, and military families flooded social media with messages of outrage, support, and demands for accountability. Local media showed up, then national reporters. And all the while, the Marines stood guard, not as a mob, but as a shield, calm, collected, unshakable. As the ambulance doors closed, Master Sergeant Bennett placed a firm hand on the window beside Raymond's stretcher. "We've got this, Gunny. You stood for us. Now we stand for you." Raymond managed the faintest nod before the sirens began again, whisking him away into the night. The war he thought he left behind had found him once more, but this time he wouldn't be fighting it alone. As Raymond Lewis was stabilized in the hospital, surrounded by family and the ever-watchful Marines who had rushed to his side, the outside world was already igniting. Within hours, the bystander footage of a 72-year-old Marine veteran being tasered in front of his granddaughter had been uploaded to social media. One video alone amassed over 6 million views before midnight. The hashtags Justice for Gunny and #Protect Our Veterans began trending worldwide. Outrage came swiftly and from every direction. Veterans organizations across the country issued public statements condemning the incident. Civil rights groups amplified the footage, demanding accountability not just for Officer Briggs, but for the systemic negligence that allowed such encounters to escalate without reason. Parents, teachers, military families, and ordinary citizens flooded Riverside's City Hall phone lines. By morning, a protest had already begun forming outside the police department. The department, caught entirely off guard, released a bland initial statement claiming an officer responded to a report of suspicious activity involving an unidentified subject, but that version collapsed as soon as body cam footage was reviewed. It confirmed what the public had already seen: Raymond never posed a threat. He complied, remained calm, and even prioritized his granddaughter's emotional safety during the entire encounter. The footage clearly showed Officer Aaron Briggs deploying the taser with unnecessary aggression as Lily screamed nearby. By the end of the week, Briggs was placed on administrative leave. 10 days later, under immense national pressure, he was officially terminated. It wasn't enough for many, including members of Congress, who had watched the footage in horror. City officials, fearing further escalation, reached out directly to Raymond's legal team to begin settlement talks. The negotiations were swift. In a unanimous decision by the City Council, Raymond Lewis was awarded $2.8 million in damages, but Raymond insisted the money be used for more than personal healing. With the help of veterans attorneys and local nonprofits, Raymond established the Lily Foundation, named after his granddaughter. Its mission to provide legal advocacy and trauma counseling for elderly individuals and veterans who are victims of police misconduct. The foundation also launched community outreach programs, pairing veterans with law enforcement recruits to share real-life scenarios and teach de-escalation rooted in mutual respect. But the impact didn't stop at the city level. Congressman Eli Vance, a former Navy JAG officer, introduced the Raymond Lewis Act, a sweeping federal bill requiring all law enforcement agencies to implement mandatory training for interacting with elderly citizens and military veterans. The act also proposed special federal oversight of departments with a history of excessive force incidents involving vulnerable populations. The bill gained rare bipartisan momentum, fueled by the emotional testimony Raymond gave before the House Judiciary Committee. Sitting in his wheelchair, Lily by his side, Raymond addressed lawmakers not as a victim, but as a lifelong protector. "I served 3 tours to defend the rights of this nation's citizens," he said, his voice steady. "I never thought I'd have to fight for those same rights on my own neighborhood's sidewalk. But this fight isn't just mine. It belongs to every senior who's been treated like a threat because of a misunderstanding. It belongs to every veteran whose story isn't obvious at first glance." His words drew thunderous applause in the hearing room and went viral across multiple platforms. Overnight, the Raymond Lewis Act became a national conversation. Officer Briggs, meanwhile, was not spared from the justice system. With mounting evidence and growing public scrutiny, the district attorney announced charges of assault with a deadly weapon, excessive use of force, and child endangerment. The courtroom was packed with veterans wearing their service caps in solidarity the day Briggs was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, making him one of the few officers in the nation to face real consequences for using a taser on an elderly veteran. Raymond, still recovering, but regaining strength, made a rare public comment outside the courthouse. "Justice was never about punishment. It was about accountability. And it's about making sure my granddaughter and yours doesn't grow up in a country where fear replaces respect." The Marines who had come to Raymond's side that evening continued to be part of his life. Master Sergeant Bennett, now promoted to Sergeant Major, helped expand the Lily Foundation's presence across military installations. Veterans across the country began sharing similar stories, moments of profiling disrespect, misunderstanding, and found in Raymond's case a source of both outrage and inspiration. The city of Riverside, seeking redemption, partnered with the Lily Foundation to create the Raymond Lewis Community Training Center, where officers and veterans could train side by side in crisis communication, trauma-informed response, and neighborhood trust building. A bronze plaque at the center's entrance bears Raymond's words, "You never know the weight someone carries until you try to knock them down. Choose to lift instead." And at the very corner where Raymond fell, where Lily had once clung to him, crying as volts surged through his aging body, the city unveiled a new mural. It showed Raymond standing tall, hand in hand with Lily, surrounded by Marines and neighbors. Beneath the image, 3 words were painted in bold, unmissable font: dignity, honor, justice. 1 year to the day after the incident, Raymond Lewis stood once more at the corner where it all began. The scar from the taser had faded, but the memory remained etched deeper than any wound. Beside him, Lily held his hand tightly, her steps now more confident, no longer a frightened child, but a witness to justice and strength. Walking with them was Officer Mariah Lopez, a new face in the Riverside Police Department. Young, empathetic, and eager to learn, she had requested the assignment personally. Unlike her predecessor, she didn't wear her badge as a symbol of control, but as a promise to serve. "I want to understand, Mr. Lewis," she had said during their first meeting. Not just the mistake, but the lesson. Raymond had agreed. Because healing meant more than justice, it meant education. The Lily Lewis Foundation, now operating in 12 states, had already helped over 400 veterans and elderly victims of excessive force. With donations, partnerships, and tireless advocacy, it provided legal defense trauma recovery and, most importantly, reform workshops for police departments nationwide. What began as a moment of pain had become a movement of progress. Raymond had also emerged as a national speaker, invited to conferences, schools, and even Capitol Hill. With quiet humility, he spoke not just of what happened, but what could be prevented. His message never changed. Dignity is not earned through medals or years. It's a right we all share and a duty we all owe. Standing before the mural painted in his honor, he looked down at Lily, then up at Officer Lopez. "Things are getting better," he said, "but we're not done." Lily smiled. "We're just getting started, Grandpa." And perhaps she was right, because now, every Tuesday, their walk wasn't just about tradition. It was a living reminder that when one person stands tall in the face of injustice, others rise with them. In a world quick to judge and slow to listen, the quiet courage of a grandfather and the love of a granddaughter changed everything. True integrity isn't proven in battle, it's revealed when you defend what's right, even when you're alone. But Raymond wasn't alone for long, because dignity once defended becomes contagious. If this story moved, you don't scroll past. Leave a comment about someone who's inspired you to stand tall. Subscribe for more powerful, true inspired stories of honor, justice, and hope because the world needs to hear them.